After a series of less than satisfying titles, Dragon Ball Xenoverse was an attempt at something new and fresh, introducing ideas that have been at the top of everyone's wish list for years. And although it didn't quite reach the heights that many fans hoped for, it was still an important step for a series starting to grow stale. I personally dug it overall, but have no trouble acknowledging the lack of attention in a lot of the design choices throughout many aspects of the game. Although new concepts were implemented, like being able to create, customize, and fight with your own created character, they never felt fully fleshed out. And after playing through the game twice, that seems like the best way to describe it as a whole. With the sequel just down the road, I'd like to take this opportunity to revisit the game. Now, I could spend hours discussing all of its shortcomings, but today I only want to focus on one aspect, one which I haven't heard many people talk about. Quite possibly, the most intriguing element of Xenoverse is its story. If you haven't played Xenoverse, then I suggest you do so, as I will be going into spoilers. When it comes to video game adaptations of Dragon Ball Z, the focal point has been reliving the iconic events of the series. But with the actual anime being completed several years ago, you can imagine how playing through the same story over and over and over again through countless titles can get tiresome. I mean, yeah, I'm a huge fan and I love most of the sagas, but it's clearly time to move on. In Xenoverse, the developers decided to try something different with the narrative. Even the marketing for the game put a strong emphasis on this change, promoting the idea of a new adventure experiencing the Dragon Ball universe like never before. Set sometime after the events of Dragon Ball Z, the story focuses on two new villains, Tawa and Mira, as they attempt to manipulate history, while Trunks, who is responsible for keeping the natural balance of time, requests a hero, your created character, to help restore the timeline to its original state. This sounds like a great idea for a new adventure in the DBZ universe. While I like the context given to the inclusion of your hero, the execution of their involvement certainly leaves a lot more to be desired. Essentially, every plunge into an event in the timeline begins with showing you the alterations in the timeline, the consequences of those changes, rewinding to before the change took place. Then your character steps into the fight before anything happened. So basically, the fights go down the same way they would have in nearly any other DBZ game. The only difference is that you get to battle alongside the characters that would have normally fought by themselves. So your new character is just an empty vessel, filling in against the same villains in the same fights that we fought countless times before. Basically, the story is like, how cool would it be if this happened? Oh, but you don't actually get to experience that. Usually, the most notable difference in these altered timelines is when either Tawa or Mira gives the villains extra energy to make them stronger. Stronger as opposed to what? This usually happens before you have the chance to fight them the first time, so you don't really get the sense that the enemy threat level has increased. The game tells you that the enemies are crueler than they originally were in history, which is such an artificial way to try and alter the storyline.
No, guys, it's different. They have a purple aura. It's a new experience. You haven't done this one before.
There are instances where slight changes in the timeline do occur during a fight, but I can only count a few times towards the end of the game where they actually made any real impact. The idea of history being threatened is severely diminished, because this overly familiar timeline hasn't actually changed much. And if you know the story, you know the outcome. Your created hero is a new observer to the story, but the player most likely isn't. So as much as the devs are trying to create something new and fresh here, it just comes off as tired and recycled. A more effective way to justify this time travel concept would be to have a single catastrophic event that changes the course of history and leave your created character to deal with the repercussions. Your hero is meant to be the backbone of this whole experience, but having to slog through such a shallow remodeling of the story causes their inclusion to feel pretty pointless, like it was an afterthought. Even the new villains themselves end up feeling like plot devices, with their only real purpose being to create the illusion of generating tougher, more menacing foes. They appear like they're causing long-lasting damage, but they are totally throwaway, and they just end up being replaced by other bigger baddie guy Demigra. I get trying to hide the main villain in the dark, but his two lackeys never fully warranted their presence. It seemed like they were only there so you could have someone new to fight every now and then. I get that this is Dragon Ball Z and that the villains don't have to be brimming with depth, but couldn't they have at least tried? Well, you could really tell how much the developers cared about them. They aren't even playable in the main fucking game. If the villains already succeeded in ruining the timeline, they would actually pose as a real threat, displaying the actual damage they could cause. It would give both the hero and the villains compelling objectives and grant them real purpose in the story. Now, maybe that's too ambitious of a concept to implement, but that would actually be a new experience. This is just the same story with a slightly different coat of paint. Dragon Ball Xenoverse is far cry from the new adventure that everyone was hoping for. It is still very much Dragon Ball as we've seen it before. With a concept full of potential to explore the Dragon Ball universe in a different way, it's a shame that the devs stuck so close to the main narrative of the series. Video games are an excellent way for the franchise to venture out of its comfort zone, and although the first game didn't exactly prove this, from what I've been seeing with Xenoverse 2, it seems to be moving in the right direction. I thought the same thing with the first one, but only time will tell. I'm hoping soon we'll get the opportunity to experience an enthralling original tale in the world of Dragon Ball. Oh, and a refined game and that other shit too. So, those are my thoughts on Dragon Ball Xenoverse and its story. If you've played it, do you agree? Do you disagree? And are you looking forward to Xenoverse 2? I know I am. I can't wait to try it out in the upcoming beta. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more videos, then you can subscribe. If you want to get updates or just see me ramble on more about games and stuff, then follow me on Twitter. Thanks again, and I will catch you on the flip side.